There is something ancient and cold in the shadows of the Carpathian Mountains, something that waits behind crumbling castle walls and rides on the whisper of wolves in the dark. This is where Jonathan Harker, a young English solicitor, journeyed one fateful May to meet a client named Count Dracula, believing he was merely facilitating a real estate transaction in distant Transylvania, unaware that the true horror of his voyage would be carved into his mind like an eternal wound. The journey itself was filled with omens, peasants crossing themselves, pressing crucifixes into his palm, warning him with wide eyes and trembling lips not to travel by night on the eve of St. George's Day, a sacred time when the veil between this world and the next thins like breath on a frozen window. But he, ever rational and bound by duty, dismissed their fears as superstition and continued up into the mountains, where the land became jagged and steep, and the sky seemed to lower itself over him like a closing lid, until, at last, a black carriage drawn by collide horses met him on the rocky road, driven by a silent, hulking figure whose hands were gloved, but whose eyes gleamed with unnatural intelligence. They raced through twisting mountain passes under a moon that bled silver, chased by howling wolves and unseen shapes darting between trees, until, without warning, the great iron gates of Castle Dracula appeared before them, creaking open as though pulled by invisible hands. Harker was greeted by a tall, pale man with a grip like iron and a voice like velvet dipped in ice. Count Dracula himself, who moved with the grace of a shadow and spoke in strange, precise English, always courteous, always smiling, and yet there was a stillness about him, a lifelessness, as if he were merely imitating a man, not being one. The castle was a labyrinth of long, empty halls and locked doors, and soon Harker realized that he was not a guest, but a prisoner. The Count never ate, never appeared by day, and never cast a reflection. And one evening, as Harker explored the forbidden parts of the castle, he encountered 3 ghostly women of exquisite beauty and monstrous hunger, who nearly drained the life from him until Dracula burst in with fury, casting them aside and snarling, "This man belongs to meat." Was then that Harker understood the truth. Dracula was a vampire, a creature of the night who fed on the living, and his interest in England was not business, but conquest. The Count vanished soon after, departing the castle with crates of native soil, leaving Harker to escape half-dead and delirious from a high window into a river far below. Meanwhile, in England, Harker's fiancée Mina Murray and her friend Lucy Westenra lived peacefully in Whitby, a coastal town whose calm was shattered one stormy night when a ship crashed ashore, its crew missing, its cargo strange, and its logbook ending in mad ravings about a shadow with glowing red ice aboard. Was only a large black dog that leaped into the surf and disappeared, and soon after, Lucy began sleepwalking and wasting away, her once rosy cheeks pale, her breath shallow, and 2 small puncture wounds blooming like poison kisses on her neck. Doctors were baffled, but her suitor, Dr. Seward, called upon his former mentor, Professor Abraham Van Helsing, a Dutch scholar who saw immediately the signs of vampiric influence and began a desperate campaign to save her. Garlic flowers were hung in her room, sacred wafers placed at the windows, but still, each night, Lucy weakened, and each morning, she remembered nothing of the strange visitations in her dreams, until, at last, despite blood transfusions from the men who loved her, Lucy died, only to rise again from her grave, wandering the night as a pale, beautiful predator who lured children into crypts and drained them of life. Van Helsing and the others, armed with knowledge and holy weapons, tracked her to her tomb, and with shaking hands and heavy hearts, they drove a stake through her heart, beheaded her, and filled her mouth with garlic, releasing her soul to peace. Even as their own horror dependent, then came the letters from Jonathan Harker, recovered and returned to England, who spoke of Dracula's castle, his powers, and his journey westward. Van Helsing realized the Count was in London, seeking new blood, and that Mina was his next target. They fortified their homes, read sacred texts, tracked Dracula's movements across the city, and when Mina was bitten and marked by the Count, her fate seemed sealed. He fed on her and forced her to drink his blood in return, binding them with a psychic link that both endangered her and allowed the hunters to track him. With time running out, they pursued the Count across Europe, back through the same mountain passes, to the crumbling castle that had begun at El. Each night, the vampire grew stronger, and Mina weaker, her soul half-bound to darkness, her mind flickering between her own voice and his. Final confrontation was savage. Under a blood-red sky and the shriek of night creatures, they found the Count's gypsy protectors and fought tooth and nail to reach the crates of earth, where Dracula lay resting by day as the sun crested the mountains. Harker and Quincy Morris drove their blades into the Count's heart and throat, and in that moment, he crumbled into dust, his eyes wide with surprise and something like relief as Mina cried out in release. Freed from his bond, the storm above them broke, and light poured through the clouds, washing the castle in fire and gold. Yet the scars remained. Quincy died from his wounds, and the survivors carried with them not just the story, but the terror. The proof that evil can wear a courteous smile and speak in calm, measured tones, that it can cross oceans and boundaries, feeding not just on blood, but on fear, and that in the end, darkness cannot be destroyed by science or logic alone, but only by the courage of those who dare to face it when all others turn away. And so, the tale of Count Dracula fades into shadow, but some say evil never dies. It only sleeps, waiting to rise again. If you felt a chill tonight, perhaps it wasn't just the story. It might have been something watching. Thank you for wandering into the dark with me. If you enjoyed this journey through fear and legend, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell. There are many more stories lurking just beyond the veil. Until next time, keep your windows locked, your crucifix close, and remember, some nightmares are real. Good night.